there, Jason here again with Throttle Body Media, and I want to do something a little different this time. Rather than just talking about the R8 all the time, I wanted to talk about my 2019 Audi Etron and kind of give you guys a little bit of my review of it. I've had it about 4 months now. I got it right around October 1st of last year, and wanted to kind of take you through some of the quirks and features and things, to use a Doug DeMuroism here, and just kind of give you my thoughts on it. Before this car, I had a Gen 2 Q7. Before that, I had two Gen 1 Q7s. So I feel like I've got a good point of comparison here between some of the different models, and can kind of talk about this in reference to those. And I've also driven the Q8 a little bit, so I may do a separate video kind of comparing the Q7 to the Q8 to the Etron. But for now, we're going to talk about my Etron and just kind of go through the different things that I want to show you on this. So let's get started. So here is my Etron in white. This is my wife's preferred color. I wasn't sure about it, but I do like the car in white, I have to admit. I wanted to kind of start off, first of all, talking about this grille design. Now, Audi and a lot of manufacturers have kind of gone to these larger grills, which especially in e-vehicles is kind of laughable, given I don't even know that they're as necessary. But this is kind of the most polarizing part of the design of the car for me. It's kind of grown on me over time, and I run it without a front plate, which kind of helps, even though that's probably not technically legal in Illinois. But overall, I can understand that is kind of for some people and not for others. So something to see. Next is these wheels. There's a couple of different wheel designs that come on the Etron. These wheels, I actually kind of like this fan blade kind of design. With kind of a chromed and a gray kind of offset there. The other wheels actually have like decals on them, and they're some of the cheapest wheels I've seen on a modern luxury vehicle. So that was completely perplexing, and didn't want to go that way. So I'm definitely happy with these, and pretty nice looking. Next thing is the headlights on this car. They are crazy, super bright, super nice, also look really great, and they they're animated and whatnot. But the really cool thing about the technology in the car is that now Audi's doing the auto sensing high beams. So if you're on a road and there's nobody around, it doesn't sense any headlights, it turns on the high beams for you, and really helps with visibility. So I really do like that feature a lot. Next is a look under the hood, and I find this to be a really interesting part of EVs, to see what's around. Now, unlike with some others, not as much trunk space up here as I expected. You've got this frunk that's got a cover. Typically the charging cable that comes with the car and everything is in there, but I've got it out, which I'll explain more later. But kind of a disappointing amount of trunk space, honestly, for the front, compared to what I thought there might be. The other kind of perplexing thing about the car is the fact that all of this other internal plumbing is all exposed. I'm really surprised that they didn't cover all of this. Not that it really matters, it's just it's kind of like an unfinished look and kind of weird. But really, at the end of the day, not super substantial, as I really don't come in here much and don't even really use the front trunk. I haven't had a necessity to use it for any actual legitimate purpose at this point yet. So that's under the hood. So next, let's talk about performance with the car. The car is rated at 355 horsepower, does 0 to 62 in 6.6 seconds, and has a top speed of 124, which I can verify. But with that, I think the thing to understand here is, this is not like a Tesla. I don't see this in any way being a comparative car to a Tesla, from the standpoint that a lot of people I hear reference those. They're talking about those impressive 0 to 60 times and the ludicrous mode and all this kind of stuff. But this car really, it's definitely very heavy, pretty spongy off the line. But the great thing about it, once you get going, is that it has great torque for passing and whatnot. If you're up at 30, 40, 50, 60, something like that, and you need to pass somebody, there is power there instantly available, and it is pretty impressive and very useful. So from that standpoint, I think the car is just fine in terms of performance for what it is. It's I view it as a family SUV or a luxury car. It's not meant to be a speed demon. So from that standpoint, I think it's just fine. But again, it's really going to kind of depend what you're into. Also, you know, again, putting it into sport mode versus comfort or efficiency mode definitely makes a big difference in terms of, you know, the kick it gives. When you're in the driver's seat, you know, even in sport mode, you know, it's got a little bit of kick, and it'll throw your head back a little bit the first time, but then you kind of get used to it. People in the back, you know, when I have my kids and my wife in the back, I do find that I do like to sort of do hits off of lights and things like that, and it'll throw them back a little bit, just kind of for fun, until my wife starts yelling at me. But you know, at the end of the day, the thing's not a powerhouse, but I don't think it's really meant to be. So from that standpoint, I'm perfectly satisfied with the powertrain, and you know, for being a family hauler, you know, and a family use car, works great for me. Next, let's talk about charging and fuel, if you will. Now, this is the exterior party piece of the e-tron. You've got your charging door here, and what you do is you hit this button, and voila, open it goes, and there's your charging port. And if you're going to go to more high performance, you know, high velocity charger, there you've got that extra piece, and this will, you know, glow green while it's charging to let you know that it's going. And then this door will also automatically close here after a little while if we leave it. Now, really, you know, in terms of range and charge, the e-tron's rated, you know, just about 204 miles, I think is like the official quote. I find I'm getting more probably in the range of 190, but it's going to really depend on how you drive. Certainly if you drive more aggressively, you're going to get less mileage out of it. I had a juice box power conditioner installed along with a 220 line in my garage, and that's typically how I charge it. I've had some problems with that recently, but NLX is being kind enough to replace my charger and kind of get everything fixed up for me. But in the meantime, I've been using the Electrify America chargers, quick chargers that are, you know, there's a few of them around the Chicago area here where I live, and those are really great. You know, we'll charge the car in a half an hour, 40 minutes. You know, so it's usually at like a Walmart or a Target or something, so just going into your shopping. But definitely would recommend, you know, have charging capability at your house. You know, as far as that range, you know, 190, 200, what have you, for me, for my use case, for my family's use case, it works. You know, my wife typically commutes in this car, and you know, goes about 30 miles one way, 60 miles round trip. Like, that works for us. It's not a big deal. She can even go, you know, 2.5 days between charges if we really want, but we usually will plug it in every night. So from that standpoint, it works for me. We don't take lots of long trips, although the nav in the car is set up to help you route through chargers if you are taking longer trips. But, you know, again, it's going to definitely slow you down, and with, you know, kids like I have, like, it's just not a really convenient way to travel. So I think at the end of the day, if you're considering this versus a Q7 or a Q8 or any other SUV or family car for that matter, I think you just got to really ask yourself, what's your use case, and is it going to make sense, you know, for what you're doing? You know, beyond that, I think it's pretty funny going by gas stations. You know, don't miss stopping to get gas, at least in this car. I get gas quite more frequently in my other car, but in this case, you know, I don't miss it. That is pretty convenient for sure. And the other nice thing is when you go to certain places, you know, museums or, like, you know, kind of large places, malls, things like that, a lot of times there's premium parking for electric cars, at least at this point in time, with chargers and things. Like when I go to Soldier Field to go to the Field Museum, for instance, you know, there's great spots right, you know, close to the exit of the parking garage, to go and park there and charge while you're doing your thing. So from that standpoint, you know, kind of a nice perk that can be helpful as well. But overall, yeah, the range, you know, it is what it is. I mean, if you're going to take a longer trip, you're going to have to think about that, and range anxiety is a real thing if you're going to be trying to stretch the limits. But if you're just going to be doing, you know, regular kind of commuting, you're not going to find that it's a big deal for you. Next thing I want to talk about is the ride quality on this thing. The suspension is absolutely phenomenal. This car rides like it's on a cloud. I mean, it is so smooth. It just eats bumps for breakfast. No big deal at all. Really comfortable ride. Can't say enough about that. But the interesting thing about that is that, you know, this has got really adjustable suspension, and the car is, you know, doing all this stuff. And when you come to a light, the car actually does this weird kind of dip thing where it's sort of like lowers itself down and back up, and you notice it pretty much every time you stop. It's the weirdest sensation. If you happen to be looking in a mirror or something, or at like a fixed point, you realize that you're moving, and it's a really kind of confusing sensation. It's probably more funny than anything, but it is definitely kind of weird and noticeable. But beyond that, again, ride quality is excellent, and particularly in comparison to my last Q7, which was a 17, I believe. It was, this car hands down is much more of a comfortable ride and very smooth, and really enjoy that about it. Okay, now on to the interior of the e-tron, and this car is going to share the new interior spec that you're seeing in a lot of the new Audis, including the Q7, the Q8, I think the A7, A8, and so on. Really liking this. Can't say enough good things about it in terms of the level of quality in here, with the wood trim, the little aluminum accents, all this stuff lights up. You've got lights that are traced into here, traced into this e-tron logo and everything. This thing just lights up at night and is so beautiful. And it's got these full 2 screens that illuminate, and I've got all the functionality here. So you've got your radio here, and you get your nice chime when it starts. Your media, get the garage doors there, phone, your nav. Interesting thing about the nav and the interface in this car is that I don't even use Apple CarPlay in this car. It has the ability to do that, but I don't even use it because Audi's kind of done their own proprietary system here. It's got Google-based maps, I believe, and I worked through that. It can do everything hands-free, ties into the media on my phone, and just really convenient, and really love it. I don't even really miss Apple CarPlay, to be honest with you. Down here, again, I think that the climate control controls that they've come up with are really cool, and you've got everything here, like pressing that seat, and then up here you can do more adjustment. You can come over here, you've got your billion different ways massage features in the chairs, which we just love. Here, these 2 screens kind of work together in tandem, so when you press that button, you come up here and you've got like the rear climate control functions that you can go into. You've got an ionizer here to kind of condition the air. You've got fragrance. I don't know, I don't find that actually I get a whole lot out of that, but still an interesting feature certainly in the car. Again, from the standpoint of the driver's perspective here too, you've got Audi's virtual cockpit, which, again, I still love. My last Q7 had this as well, but this again is kind of the next iteration of it, and just really, works really well, and, very happy with it. Down here in the center console, kind of interesting, you've got, conductive charging here for your phone, and then you've got this nook here, which kind of works as, both dual cup holder, or you can open that up for something bigger, or you can actually close the whole thing off. So kind of some interesting convertibility there. Pretty nice. And you've got the usual stuff like a center console here and whatnot. But overall, really can't say enough good things about the quality of the interior. And again, here's some of that lighting I was kind of mentioning. We've got this kind of set up in a purple and red motif, if you can see. And also you can kind of see some of the red detail there. So yeah, Audi's been doing a great job with interiors, for years now. Since I got my first Q7 and my first A7, I've always thought that their interiors were really top notch, and just really impressed with the build quality for sure. A key thing I want to talk about with this car is the noises it makes when you drive it. I think by federal regulations, when the car is going like under 25 miles an hour, the car needs to simulate engine noise or some kind of noise to alert pedestrians and whatnot that there's a car coming by. But this is really kind of where the futuristic kind of feel of the car comes into play. When you put the car into reverse, take a listen to what it sounds like. It's just this weird kind of And it's pretty funny to kind of see people's reactions if they're near it and hear it, because it just doesn't sound like anything else you're familiar with. Now let's put it into drive. Again, it's kind of like a slightly different tone, but it's the same kind of thing. I don't know how well it's coming through on camera, but it definitely is this weird kind of just hum, kind of an electrical sounding hum, not really sounding like an engine, which I'm glad they didn't like do fake engine noises like BMW or something. That's just not really my thing, but it's a pretty cool sound. Reminds me of something out of the Jetsons or whatnot, but yeah, pretty neat, and just something to be aware that the car does. Something that's particularly interesting in the e-tron, I think it is the only car, the only EV that has shift paddles, at least that I'm aware of. And you might say, well, there's no real transmission, it's all one gear. What would you possibly use shift paddles for? Well, the interesting thing is that you use this for regenerative braking. And as I apply the paddle, it starts to slow me down, which you can see there in that efficiency thing. That green section going down is actually the regenerative braking kicking in, and you see it went away now. This is a very interesting feature. The plus paddle, when you've engaged regenerative braking, the plus paddle reduces it. So the minus increases it and the plus reduces it. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but it is a feature. I do like the regenerative braking. I find that while it will not stop the car by itself, it will help to slow it down. And it's, obviously to try to recapture some power, and I do like that. Another interesting quirk is this small asterisk button. Now, if you are familiar with the Q7, I believe the Q5 as well, that typically would be where the heated seat button would be, or the heated steering wheel, button would be. But interestingly, this car doesn't have that, which we'll come back to. But what that button can be used for is programmable for different types of functions. I have it set up to open one of my garage doors, but you can also tell it to go back to certain presets in the radio, and then I think also for like storing like a favorite location or something you want to navigate to. So it's kind of an omni button that you can program. So kind of a cool feature that I've never really seen something quite like that before. It's not monumental, but again, kind of interesting. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, as I alluded to, is that this car doesn't have a heated steering wheel, which is a pretty common function in luxury cars now. Now, what the car does have, though, is the ability to, there's an app that you use with the car, and you can go in and tell it to turn the heater on remotely up to a half an hour in advance of when you're going to leave. And you can either schedule that, or you can just go in the app and tell it turn it on now, and then it'll be ready, if you're leaving in 20 minutes or something like that. This really is a game-changing feature that my wife in particular absolutely loves. It's one of the selling points of the car for her, and just really thinks it's great. This, by and large, makes the heated steering wheel function kind of unnecessary, as you basically, you can warm up the car and get the steering wheel, pretty serviceably warm along with the rest of the car. It could probably use to be able to adjust the heat and AC parameters a little bit. That's not in there yet, but just being able to do that really is awesome here in the winter time, and I imagine will be nice in the summer as well. So another cool feature. Lastly is the trunk of the e-tron. Now, I can definitely say it is shorter than the Q7's trunk, and more so than anything really in terms of vertical space, because of the fact that this car is a little more of a hatchback than the Q7 was. So from that standpoint, I find that the e-tron's trunk, while a little smaller, completely workable. Again, I got 5 people in my house. I go to Sam's Club a lot and get a bunch of stuff, and I find I can still stuff all that stuff back in here just like I did before. I might have to format it a little bit differently, but other than that, it generally all still fits. So from that standpoint, again, kind of just about, getting the lay of the land, getting comfortable with how the size of the car, the format of it, and generally quite usable still for everything I need to do. Overall, that is a look at my 2019 e-tron. Hopefully this has been useful for you in terms of providing some information about the car, and certainly happy to take any questions you have down in the comments, or reach out to me. Happy to provide any information I can about the car, to make it, see if it's something that's right for you. And I'll sort of throw out my quick shout out here in the Chicago area to Fletcher Jones Audi. That's where I bought mine. My buddy Brandon there, did a great job getting me into a great car, and I think they would do a great job for you. So definitely check them out if you're in the area. Take care.